Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a quick little review here of the Ortur R1. I haven't even taken this thing out of the box, so we're going to take a look at it, do a couple of test engraves, and see what my thoughts are. So without any further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's see what we've got. Turn that around. All right, well, it's a good start with the packaging front. Let me get that out of here. All right, so foldable, portable laser engraving. This is what we got. Got some stuff to unpack carefully. All right, feels like there's something in here. Probably the power supply. We've got our USB, it looks like USB-C connection. And then we've got a small power brick along with a piece of acrylic. On the back here, 24 volts in, we've got the lock. We've got a micro SD card already installed. There's probably some files on there. USB, reset, and boot. And then I'm guessing that's probably a lock. So completely pull out the base plate. So we've got a metal base plate right there. That's good. Guess that's the click. It's more of a thunk. So that is the front of the machine. It's a little, it's not the strongest machine. We do have a fan back here, I guess, to exhaust our exhaust. And then our base plate can slide back in the bottom. And it sits there. So, okay. Kind of sort of fits. It's kind of gets hung up there on the side a bit. That is a little wobbly, but we'll see. Let me give you a quick rundown on the app experience. First, the QR code in the book did not work. I had to use the QR code that is printed on the bottom of the metal tray inside the laser in order to get to the download location. Once I did get it installed on my phone, it was quite a bear to actually connect to the machine. It probably took 4 or 5 tries following the included instructions. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just continued to repeat it over and over again. And finally, I was able to get the unit to connect to the app. Note, you can only use 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. You cannot be on a Wi-Fi signal that shares 5 gigahertz or is only 5 gigahertz. Now, once I got to the app itself, it was just as frustrating to use as I remember. I was unable to edit any text. I could not access my photos despite giving it permissions to access my photos. I probably spent about 20 minutes in all, and it was just so frustrating that I gave up on the app and moved on to Lightburn. Getting things set up in Lightburn was a little better, but still not great. I tried first to do the Find My Laser feature in Lightburn, and it did the scan, but it was not able to find my laser. So I went to Device Manager, and I found that it was operating as a USB serial device on COM5, so I had to manually set this up. This is probably not something that a first-time user is going to know how to do. There is no guide on how to install this in Lightburn, so you're kind of on your own. I had to go to the website to verify the dimensions for the machine, but once I got everything set, the machine connected and I was able to do my tests. Since this machine has a black metal bottom with no reference marks, the first thing you're going to want to do is enable the laser on when framing in Lightburn. To turn this feature on, go to Laser Tools, then Device Settings, then navigate to the Basic Settings tab, and you'll see Enable the Laser Fire button, which you can turn on, that will help as well, and then Laser On when framing, and you'll want to set a very low power. I used 1% in this case. The first test that I ran was a speed and power test in order to see how it performed with line engraving. One of the first things I noticed is the machine will operate without the safety eye shield in the down position, so buyer beware. The R1 completed this task without any issues. I will note, however, that I did notice a little bit of a wobbliness in the text, which was completed at about the highest speed this machine is capable of. The next test I performed was an engraving test. I wanted to have some good numbers for further tests, including image engraving. One thing I do want to note is that the exhaust fan on the back does not have any means to attach a hose or any other kind of fume extraction device, so it's just going to blow smoke wherever you have it located. The test completed fine and the results were acceptable. I was able to get some numbers to move on to my next test. To make it a little bit easier to place stuff on the bottom of the bed, I went ahead and made this grid in Lightburn, and then I actually engraved it onto the bottom of the bed of the R1. This allowed me to place things with a little more accuracy and maintain alignment. Before moving on to image engraving, I wanted to see how the repeatability of the positioning and accuracy were for this particular laser. The R2 had issues in this area, so I homed the machine and then sent it to the X10, Y10 position and repeated that a couple times to see if it was able to return to the position repeatedly and accurately, and fortunately it was able to accomplish this. Next, I wanted to test how well the R1 handled image engraving, so I went to laserpix.com, grabbed this image, and then set everything up to engrave on one of the included wood business cards. This was the first instance where I ran into an issue that is related to the build size of this machine. Lightburn gave me a warning that I might be out of bounds due to overscan settings, but I chose to continue just to see what would happen. Sure enough, the machine stopped before it even completed the first line, so I had to come up with another solution. Since the machine needed more room in the x-axis, I rotated the image 90 degrees and then proceeded with the engraving. Doing this allowed the engraving to complete without any further issues, and it took about 13 minutes and 49 seconds to complete. Overall, the quality of the engraving is pretty good. Small power diode lasers like this do have a very fine spot size, so I could have probably increased the DPI to get a little bit finer details in both the X and Y axes. However, there are some artifacts that are most likely due to the belt and motor pulleys. Next, I wanted to see how well the R1 would handle this anodized aluminum dog tag that they sent. And since I didn't want to mark up the bed, I placed it on this small wooden card. I took measurements of the dog tag and made a rectangle in Lightburn, engraved it on the card, and then placed the dog tag as you see here. I then made a inside rectangle where I wanted to put my text, made sure that everything fit properly. I went ahead and framed the job before starting the engraving. The job completed in 39 seconds. As you can see, the letters are pretty crisp, although there is some glitching in the number section, and a higher DPI would have reduced the space in between the lines. To prepare for my final job, I installed the triangular blades which raise the media up off the cutting bed and use the included focus tool to set the focus. You can see here the laser head moves up and down, and then it is set at the proper height by tightening the thumb screw. My final test was a cutting test, so I used the material test generator in Lightburn. I set my speeds from 100 to 500 millimeters per second and 10 to 100% power. I framed the job and then started the cutting process. You can see here that the safety glass is quite fouled, so I had to raise it to get footage of the cutting process. But the job completed in 5 minutes and 50 seconds, and here we have the results of this test. The Ortur R1 was able to cut through this 1mm plywood at up to 400 millimeters per minute at 100% power. That equates to about 6.67 millimeters per second. All right, let's talk about the pros and cons real quick. Pros, it's portable. Kinda, I guess. I'm not exactly sure why they do the folding design. You save this much room, like 2 or 3 inches, by making it foldable. But anyway, it does have a pretty precise laser dot. Let me switch over here to the overhead cam, and you can see it's got pretty good. Usually your lower power, 5, 10 watt diodes, they're going to have a nice concentrated dots. So you're able to do engravings that are really fine and detailed, as you can see here. And we were able to cut some very thin plywood, but yeah, so that's good. And finally, the focus distance. It is kind of nice. Normally, diode lasers, they'll have like maybe 1 centimeter, 10 millimeters, if that. Sometimes it's 3, 5 millimeters of space between the bottom of the lens housing and your material. So it's really difficult to use any kind of a hold down, or, if you're using something that's too thick, bumpy, whatever it is, you run into problems. This thing, based on the design, because there's so much space between, they need that space up here for the gantry, etc., and the work area on the bottom, you've got that pretty nice distance there. So I would say that's a plus. But now let's talk about the cons. First, that app. That app is garbage. When I reviewed the R2, I had problems with it on an Android device. I eventually had to switch over to an Apple iPad to get even the app to load and connect, and it doesn't look like it's gotten any better. I was actually able to get this one to connect to my Android phone. It took a lot of trial and error. Once I did get it to connect, it's just so frustrating to use. As you saw, I mean, I couldn't even type the text, it wouldn't, even though I gave it permission to access the photos, they wouldn't open. So for a new, this is targeted to kind of the beginner market, and if you're just getting into things, you really need that experience to just work. So they really need to work on that app. Second, exhaust. There's a fan, there's an exhaust fan on the back of this thing, and it does blow smoke out, as you saw, but there's no way to hook anything up to it. If you want to attach a hose or anything to use this indoors, then you're going to have to come up with some solution on your own. So basically, you need to use this thing outside so that it can vent properly. My studio smells like smoke right now. The power cord. The power cord is too short. They used one of these standard bricks, and this is all the length of the power cord. It is, like I said, it's probably about 3 feet long. And I had to get an extension cord because this is a standing desk and I'm standing right now, but the power cord is dangling from the extension cord. It won't even fit right here. Next, that build size, 100 by 100. It sounds like, okay, well, that's about 4 inches by 4 inches. But you're not even going to be able to use that all because the laser needs some room, depending on speed. It is speed dependent, but you've got to have some room for overscan. So especially during an engraving, you tend to want to do those as fast as you can, just for time's sake, but you're going to probably have to slow down the laser so that it doesn't need as much overscan room. So that's kind of a bummer as well. And then finally, the fit and finish. Like this safety window, as I pointed out a couple times, and here, let me move this back a little bit so you can actually see. Every time you pull it up and down, it's held up at the top with magnets. That's kind of cool, but when it comes down, it's not even flush because you got to push it over on the side. So the fit and finish, it kind of feels like anywhere they could save money, they saved some money, and you're going to be the one that pays for it. So those are my pros and cons. My final thoughts. Well, sometimes just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should do something. Not to say that every small portable laser is going to have the same issues. I'm just not sure what purpose this fulfills. If you're looking to get into laser engraving, I'd say within about an hour, you're going to max out what you can do with this machine, just because that tiny little build size and the constraints with this format, you're kind of going to be tapped out. Not to mention, without that app, and again, like I said, even when it did get it to work on the R2, it was not useful. There are other small lasers out there that have, like, the screen. Again, Ortur on the R2, they big, beautiful touch screen on the front, but it's underutilized. There are other lasers out there like Algo Laser that have a whole OS that they put on their machines so that you can actually take just the machine and utilize it and have plenty of functionality without having to connect it to a computer. So again, overall, I would probably tell you to pass on a machine, at least this specific machine. But I mean, up to you. Let me know. What do you think? Did I miss something here? Am I way off the mark? Do you have an R1 and you've been happy with it? Please let me know down in the comments. I would appreciate it if you'd take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and please hit the notification bell so you know when I drop new content. As always, I enjoy the time that we get to spend together here on the channel. Let's keep on learning, burning, printing, and growing together. Take care, everyone.